Hey, how are you? Welcome to WrapChat. I'm joined here by a very special guest, Aisha Tyler. She is a writer, director, producer, probably most known by the listeners for Criminal Minds and The Walking Dead. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm doing great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you on. Such a huge guest.
Amazing. Yay. Well, I hope I don't let you down.
Oh God, no, you're fantastic. Don't worry. You have it. Aisha, finally, welcome to the show.
Yay! We did it. We did it. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you so much for being on the show. Honestly, I've watched so much of your stuff growing up. It's fantastic. I'm obsessed with Criminal Minds. I love the earlier seasons. It's great. And also the later seasons is fantastic. I love it. I love Walking Dead as well. You've directed episodes for Walking Dead. I'm a huge zombie fan, so I'm wearing a Saw t-shirt, but I'm a big horror guy, so But for starters, for the listeners at home, could you give us a brief explanation on what you do, what's your background, and all that jazz?
Yes, absolutely. I'll try to do my origin story in a minute or so. So I was born in San Francisco, California, and I started out as a stand-up comedian. That's how I got my kind of entry into the entertainment business. I did that for quite a bit of time. And then I got my first kind of big break, if you want to call it that, on a show called Talk Soup, which I don't think ever made it to Ireland. But it was a show where we would play little clips of reality shows, and then we would make fun of them. So it was a very joke-driven show. You would write a lot of jokes. You would tell a lot of jokes. Some of them were good, some of them not so good. But it was a really great way to learn how to write for television. And then I'm very much compressing time. But a little while after that, I got my biggest break probably, which was I got a show called Friends that really kind of changed my life. And obviously many people still watch that show ad nauseum to this day. But it was a big deal, and really kind of changed the trajectory of my career. While I was on Talk Soup and also as a stand-up, I did a lot of writing. So I started writing other long-form things once those projects ended, and I was writing some scripts, and I had an action script because I'm a big genre person. I'm a big action person. I loved those movies as a kid. And they were like, you seem to have a real clear vision of how this movie should, play out. You should direct. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what that means. Thank you for your vote of confidence, but I literally have no idea what that would entail. So I went away and I started shadowing. I'm sure people listening to your podcast know what shadowing is, but you go to another set where you don't work and you just watch everybody work and you try to learn as much as you can while they're working. And I did that for a long time. And then I was at San Diego Comic-Con for the hardcore nerds who are listening, and which is one of my favorite places to be. That is my happy place, Comic-Con. and I met John Logan, who's an incredible screenwriter and wrote movies like Skyfall, and he had created a show called Penny Dreadful that was shooting in Wicklow. And he was like, come visit me on set. And people always say that to you, and everyone's like, yeah, come visit you on set. But like nobody, people don't really do that. I was like, I'm going to Ireland by myself. I'm going to go do this. And I thought, well, I want to make the most out of this trip. So it was another show that was shooting in County Wicklow at the time called Vikings. And so I called them and said, hey, can I come shadow on your show? And they said yes, which was great. So in August of 2014, I flew to Ireland and shadowed on those two shows. And it was a great experience. I learned so much. And I just had the best time. I had watched every episode of Vikings, so that was rad. I got to run around with the shields and the swords and everything like that. And it was great. It was a really great experience. And while I was there, I met a bunch of Irish artists, writers and musicians and everything, just kind of some through some mutual friends and some, through my shadowing experience. And two of them invited me to come back and do a short film in Galway that December. And it was a kind of a Christmas themed short. I don't know, when someone says to you, hey, do you want to come film a short film in Ireland? You're like, oh, well, I'm going to curse on your show. Fuck yeah. So I was like, yes. And I came back in December of that year and shot a short film called Erscola Kayla. Yeah. And which was lovely. It was a story about two brothers who were separated. Well, they weren't biological brothers, but they had been raised as brothers, and they were separated as children, and then they come back together as adults. And it was just really beautiful and sweet and sad and Christmassy. And that was my kind of initial introduction to filming in Ireland. It was a great experience. And one of those artists, a writer, producer, actor named Emmett Hughes, was like, that was such a great experience. I have a feature script. Would you like to direct it? And I had been looking for my first feature for a while. People's typical first feature is, you're trying to kind of, control for chaos. So, you want to, everyone's first feature is like family comedy around a table in a house, you know what I mean? And I was really looking for something distinctive. And his first script was about a drug addict who was trying to avoid relapsing while driving through Los Angeles during rush hour. And it just seemed like a really cool, unusual first film. And so we collaborated on that. And that was my first feature. And then since then, I've directed a lot of American television. You've mentioned a little bit. I've been really lucky. I am a genre director. I mean, I have stepped off of that path a bit, but I was raised by a single dad, and all my favorite movies have explosions in them. So that's really the stuff that I want to do. So I'm really lucky because I was a huge fan of The Walking Dead before I got this job. So I don't know. I mean, my little 12-year-old mind was just blown being able to direct Fear the Walking Dead and Walking Dead. It was just the best. And I did every single show in the Walking Dead universe at the time, which was Fear the Walking Dead, The Walking Dead, The Mothership, Fear the Walking Dead, and also a show called Walking Dead, The World Beyond, which was a kind of a younger skewing Walking Dead show that ran for 2 seasons. So, and, other shows like Evil, and obviously I've directed, I think, 6 episodes of Criminal Minds Evolution. So, that's not my whole story, but that's my speed rack story for you.
Everyone climbs, nobody falls on you. Shit, that's the main thing,
That's it. That's the main thing. No major injuries, but plenty of heartbreak. But we can talk about that later.
But I was just going to go back on really quickly your directing kind of style. Like you said, you've directed so much kind of like different forms of content, mostly thriller, but a lot of kind of genre kind of styles, kind of stuff, but quite big budget and quite small budget. In your own opinion, what's the kind of key differences between directing those different levels of production?
And you mean like in terms of just like resources, like budget level?
Yeah, that kind of style. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think the first thing I'll say is that I started out making, some very small things. Like the way that I started making things was, when I was doing all that shadowing, I just wanted to start to make stuff, and I was kind of trying to start very small. So I had a lot of friends that were in bands, and I said, hey, if you let me come on the road with you for a couple days, I'll just make you a free music video, and you can use it or not use it. You know what I mean? But it's free. And, the only thing I ask is that I can put my name on it so people know that I made it. And so I did that for a few different American rock bands. And that was a really great way. I operated the camera. I did all the editing. I did the color correcting pretty poorly. But, I learned a lot about myself and my aesthetic, and just learning all the different aspects of, how to put a piece together. And starting that way, I think, is really good because you have to understand what goes into a finished product, and you're making a lot of mistakes along the way, and then you're correcting for them. Like I'd get into the edit, I'd be like, what asshole shot this stuff? You know what I mean? Oh, it was me. Okay. It was a lot of just like trial and error, but I don't know. And I guess, like, listen, a director who's directed much bigger movies than me, and I just literally just went and saw yesterday, I did a double feature of Mission Impossible 8 and F1. And I was thinking a lot about how big and expensive those movies are. And I think as a director, you're always thinking, how would I do this if this was my movie, right? How would I attack this, And those movies are massive. I mean, I don't even know, I need to read about it, but I'm sure F1 took like a year, like a full year at least to shoot. So I imagine that a really, really high budget director would have a different different response to your question. But for me, I feel like all filmmaking is the same. I feel like whether you have $100 or $100 million, your approach, your prep, your discipline, it has to be the same. And in fact, at a small budget, you just have to be more disciplined and more focused and more willing to, you're trying to extract a lot of value, from very little resources. And I don't mind working at that small budget. I find it to be pretty exhilarating. It's frustrating sometimes. You wish you had more money, but I really think that if you're careful and you're thoughtful, you can really do a lot with very few resources. And the last thing I'll say is that I'm really happy that I've done so much television, because television is such a sprint. It takes essentially like the standard amount of time you get to make an American television show is 8 days. And that's a film quality. That's you have, American TV, those episodes cost like $8 million, $10 million. So that's a film budget. And you're shooting, let's just say like a conservative $7 million. That's a conservative number. You got 8 days with $7 million to turn in an episode of TV. And so if you can follow that schedule with focus and discipline, then you can do anything. So I guess the takeaway for people listening is there's no cruising. At any budget level, you cannot cruise. You really have to prep really hard. You have to be really, really disciplined, really thoughtful. Because, especially at the small budgets, you can't, there's no money to waste. So you don't want to make any mistakes, because this stuff is still going to go wrong. I don't care how well prepped you are. Everything is still going to go off the rails. But the more prepared you are, the more more prepped you are, and the more your departments are prepped, the better you'll be able to deal with the inevitable disaster that is coming your way.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's like, oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, go for it.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I 100% agree, because like you could be like you have so much pre-production, so much prep, so much like planned out for your film or your project, and something just happens and your shit hits the fan. Like it's one of those things where it's just like you need to be really good at expecting the unexpected, essentially.
Yeah. I always tell people not to be negative, but there are like maybe something's going to go wrong. I'm like, it will. It's like many things are just not going to turn out the way that you planned. And you have to, the best in every department, I think, you have to be, you have to be like Bruce Lee. You have to be like water. You know what I mean? Like you have to be really, really prepared, and then you have to be willing and able to go with the flow. Because if you're really rigid, when something does go wrong, you won't be able to tolerate it. And that's when you see people screaming or breaking down, and then, bad things happening on set.
Yeah, all that jazz, just like, just we'll leave that for now. Put a pin in that. But it's that kind of thing. I'd like, but it's that kind of thing, especially like I feel like with your film that you just directed there, I Hope We Can Still Be Friends. It's a very kind of claustrophobic and very confined space that you're working with for like a good portion of the film. And I've always wondered, like, when you're writing something like that, how difficult is it to kind of keep, like, in your mind, keep the story interesting, but also try to keep the audience interested in the film itself?
Such a good question. And what's interesting, Mark, is that, okay, so my first feature was, all took place in a car. Like, that was the movie. It was a guy driving through LA trying to not do drugs. Like he had a really difficult, kind of childhood and like young adulthood, and he was sober, and he has this really bad day, and the whole day is him just trying not to get high. But the whole movie took place in a car. So after that, I kind of became like the containment director. So I would often find TV shows giving me their like bottle episodes, which was cool because, it was nice for people to think, oh, she can take a really minimal space and make it compelling. That's a nice reputation to have. And like I did an episode where, people were stuck in a glass box. I did an episode of TV where people were climbing through like an air conditioning vent. Like I'm like the people stuck in places director now. But I do think what's interesting about I do think what's interesting about those contained spaces is that you really have to focus on character, and you can't trick people. You can't be like, look at this shiny object, look at this explosion. Like, it's really got to be about the story. With I Hope We Can Still Be Friends, it was, and I like problems. Like, I really feel like, it's our nature as human beings to kind of gravitate towards the easy outcome or the easy answer. But for me as a director, I'm like, what's a really difficult way to do this? Because that's hopefully going to be a really original way to do this, and for people that don't know, I Hope We Can Still Be Friends is a movie about a guy who wakes up in a box and doesn't know how he got there, and then slowly he's starting to descend into madness, and he finds out that someone is in the next box, and they start talking, and then they figure out if they can understand what they have in common, then maybe they can figure out why they're in there, and they can figure out how to get out. And that's kind of the premise of the movie. And it's not the first movie to put a guy in a box, right? So then the question becomes, how can I make this different? How can I make this movie different than all the other guy in a box movies? And, and one of them was, and you're a horror guy, so you'll understand that most of those movies are kind of like really dark, really murky, very coffin-like, and don't give you a lot of like visual dynamism. And so I was like, okay, how can we make this feel more visually compelling and really unusual? And I studied a lot about solitary confinement, which is illegal in many countries because it's considered torture, but we still have it in the United States, among other barbaric behaviors. And people go crazy pretty quick in solitary confinement. Like, it doesn't take very long. Human beings need human contact. And so I just started to think about, well, how can I make this feel and look different? I think it's interesting. It's like, there's just so much content out there. There's so many movies. There's so much television. The challenge for the artist is really not what is this like, but how can I make this not like anything else? And I think that's the question people should be asking themselves when they're developing their own projects. People always ask you, especially in Hollywood. I don't know if it's as common in Ireland. Like, this is like, Ted meets, the War of the Roses, but with a little bit of Saw. You know what I mean? They're always asking.
I get you. Yeah.
But I think it's really important to figure out how to make your movie not like anything else, and to really ask yourself tough questions at every part of the process. So, I really just counter-programmed. I was like, okay, it's a box, but it's not dark. It's bright. You know what I mean? It feels almost like torture. It feels like, the lights are on to keep this guy awake and to pierce into his mind and to control his behavior. And I don't think this will ruin it for people that want to see it, but when we were shooting it, even my own movie that I wrote, I kept thinking, well, we don't know what's going on. Is it aliens? Is he dead? Is it Squid Game? You know what I mean? Is he a master? And that was great, because it's, we're so good at all of us, I think we're kind of jaded, and we're really good at figuring movies out before they're even kind of getting going. And so I really wanted to kind of make a movie that people couldn't figure out until the very last bits of the film. And that was the goal. Can I make a movie that is intriguing enough that people aren't ahead of you? You don't want people to get ahead of you. You don't want them to get ahead of the characters. So that was a very long answer to your question, but that was the stuff that I was thinking about as I was making the film.
Yeah, but you should direct Saw 11. Honestly, God, you really should. But
I should.
I was always wondering. Honestly, genuinely, you get on the Blumhouse. Honestly, you have to. But what I always found kind of interesting with almost kind of like your directing style is that you're so quickly able to adapt to kind of any situation, especially with this film, with how kind of confined it is, in a sense that, because like we're spending so much time, without spoiling, obviously, we're spending so much time in this kind of like just this like wooden box essentially. I've always wondered, like, how do you kind of convey that in your directing style to your actors? Like, how do you try like tell them like psychologically and physically like what emotional state they should be in, kind of? Do you get what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I do. I do get what you mean. So, and it's a great question. So, one interesting thing is that we concepted the boxes, and they had a lot of like dogmatic rules around them, like that, why they were the size they were and why they were made of the material that they were made of. And those were kind of rooted in story. I really work I can't, nothing, again, I'm sure that there's many things that I could improve as an artist, but I really try to have everything really grounded in character and in story and in reality. Even if the rules aren't apparent to the audience will still feel the rules. Do you know what I mean? Even if they don't know why they're feeling what they're feeling, they feel them. And so when we were building the sets, I remember getting in the box and immediately getting so, honestly, so sad. Like I thought, God, if you woke up in here and you didn't know how you got in here and you couldn't get out, like, the human animal is just not really like set up for that kind of containment. You know what I mean? So I felt an immediate kind of emotional relationship to the space. And I just communicated that to the actors. I said, it's funny, like people have a lot of acting tricks. And everybody should do what's good, right for them. But for me, I always just think and feel the feelings that the character is thinking and feeling in the moment, right? Like it's on the page. So you wake up in a box and you can't get out. And what does that make you feel? That's very, very basic. It's very simple. And luckily, both of the actors were really present and, kind of knew what they were getting into, weren't kind of fighting it or weren't like, oh, this is too hard. You know what I mean? They were like, they wanted like, Emmett Hughes, he was freezing the whole time. And I kept saying like, let me get you a heater. And he was like, no. Like, this is what my character would be feeling. So I have to feel these feelings. So they were both just available to feel what it felt like to be in that box under those conditions. And I think, because I've been an actor for such a long time, I try to make my direction as simple as possible. It's very basic. You're in this box, and you cannot get out. And this other person on the other side of the wall is the only thing in your world. They're your only friend. They're your only connection with your being human. And if you think about that for more than a couple of minutes, it will put you in a very specific state of mind. So, I just want to make things feel as emotionally simple as they can be for the players. If you're like, well, remember when you were a kid and you got an ice cream cone and then it dropped on the ground? And you're like, you can't think all that shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Remember the time you got an ice cream cone and then your flake fell on the ground and you were depressed about losing your flake? No. Try to keep things as simple as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, keep it simple as possible. I 100% agree, especially because like there's so many times, like it's so interesting to see about actors because like they're in so many unique positions. And like prime example with the film, like Emmett's character and Caroline's character are like in those boxes, and you can't say to them, oh, like just think of a bad memory. It's like, no, think of what you like, what exactly right here, right now. What do you expect? We feel like you're locked in that sort of situation. Mm-hmm. What do you think you would do? Kind of, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Or what do you think your character would do? Yeah,
absolutely. What would your character do? And for both of their characters, but specifically for Emmett's character, who was in there for a lot longer than Caroline's character, I really talked about the fact that he had very few items in there with him, and so every single item was very important, like very precious to him. Imagine, like we all live in these homes with lots of items and, dishes and blankets and television and, PlayStation. But imagine that you're in a box and it's only 6 feet by, 4 feet by 8 feet. And you have a blanket and and then you get a crayon, and you've got to fill the day. Like, what are you going to do with your time? You're going to look at that crayon. You're going to play with that crayon because there's nothing else going on in there. And, humans, we've evolved and we're pretty sophisticated, but we're also still animals. And, leaning into the, the kind of the primal part of yourself, and the part that needs connection with other people, the part that's lonely,
like tribalistic kind of nature, kind of.
Exactly. So it was very straightforward. I just said, like, your relationship to these things is that these are the only things in the world to you. There's nothing else exists but what's in this room. And what does that make you feel?
Yeah, 100%. I've always kind of like try to understand that as well. Like coming from myself, a sound background, like I'm always just worried about where I put the mic. But I always find it interesting to see because I've worked with so many different directors. I always find it interesting to see every single director's approach to their own unique kind of situation, to their own unique writing or someone else's writing. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of feel like I just kind of feel like it's just kind of fascinating. Like I don't really have a question about it. I just find it kind of fascinating. Do you know what I mean? So
it's interesting. I mean, I guess, like genre stuff obviously has a lot of complexity, and you're always chasing kind of set pieces, but you always want to ask yourself the question, if nothing else was going on in the scene, would the scene still work? Right?
Yeah.
So that's a really good question to ask yourself as you're writing. Like, you have these two people talking or whatever it is they're doing, but like if they weren't doing anything else, would the conversation still have value and have meaning? And if you start there, then everything else that you're layering on top of it becomes like gravy, right? But if the scene doesn't work without that extra stuff, then the scene doesn't work. You can't be tricking people by giving them like a bunch of bells and whistles. You got to start with the characters and start with their interaction and go from there.
100% agree. Because like at that point, then like people are just going to be nitpicking the shit out of it, and they'd be like, okay, well then what's the point? And I've always kind of wondered as well with the actual casting of itself. I know Emmett's the writer of the film as well, but I've always wondered, was Emmett always the first choice for Jason, and was Caroline always the first choice for Sarah, or was there anyone else you had in mind?
That's a really good question. I think that script went through a lot of iterations. I mean, one thing I know, having done 2 features with Emmett, and I executive produced a movie he did 2 years ago called Advent that he shot in Ireland. I wasn't on set, but I helped them with some of their creative choices. That he's a super prolific guy. Like he creates a lot of projects. He's churning ideas out all the time. So I think that script probably went through like a lot of different iterations, that he was going to be in it, he wasn't going to be in it. But when we locked in on this production window, we kind of shaped that role for him, which was great because, again, without giving too much of the story away, we wanted a guy who could both be very, very cocky and then very, very vulnerable. We wanted someone who could kind of see breakdown over time. So, and I think that's the most interesting way to play that character. With Caroline, I think there was a few different people that we were talking about having in the movie. And the movie went through many, many, many iterations before I actually did a pass on it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of kind of different story shapes. So, but I always wanted to work with Caroline. I've known her for a while, actually. She lives in Los Angeles, so we're friendly here. And she's and I'd seen her in a couple of plays, so I knew she was a really, really good actress. And I don't know, it's fun to work with your friends. I think
of course
there's like a shortage of like great roles out there, and so if you have really chunky in your pocket and you think, oh, I could give this to a buddy of mine and I know they're going to do a great job. And also we didn't have a lot of money, so working with a friend, they're going to be just there for the beauty of the work and not be complaining. So but yeah, I mean, I thought they were really great together, and because I knew it was going to be such a fast shoot and so intimate, it was good to have 2 people who were already friends and who I knew would be able to rely on each other and lean on each other when the work got difficult.
Yeah, definitely. Even when I was on set, full disclosure, I was a boom off for a few days on this. But
we loved having you.
I should have mentioned that at the start. But anyway, but even I could see it as well from my own perspective. Like I could really tell the chemistry was there. The chemistry and even on and off, like when we were off, like prepping for the next scene, I could see Emmett and Caroline, like workshopping, like kind of working their way through the next couple of scenes, the next couple of lines, seeing where the character is. I always find it fascinating to see that kind of stuff because, like, I could never do it myself. Like, I just don't have the confidence. I'm more of a techie person, so I'm just like, you do you, and I'll be grand, you know. So I always find it really cool to see it, like, see the process within itself, whether it's like directing, writing, acting. I find it super interesting. I was going to move on to my next question really quickly about kind of your career, in a sense, where you've had such a long and rich history of being not only an actress, being a director, a producer, even a presenter as well for a long time, an Emmy-winning presenter at that. I've always wondered, like, with those many hats that you always wear, is it tough to kind of jump from project to project when you have so many kind of like you've held so many positions like that, or is it just something where it just became natural to you over the years?
That's a good question. I think the best answer is that because people will sometimes say, oh, what do you prefer? And I definitely now at this point in my career, like, directing is really the thing that I want to do, that I feel the most intense joy when I'm working. It's the thing that I like doing the most. But I feel like all of those things, they all feel like just aspects of the same job. Like, I was a stand-up, and so I was that, being a stand-up comedian is a little bit like being a presenter. And then then when I was hosting Talk Soup, that had a presenter-like quality where I was kind of hosting, but I was telling jokes. And then I started writing more long-form stuff, which led me into screenwriting. And then I wrote a couple of books. And so, like, screenwriting led, so like to me, they all feel like this, like, just like sides of a Rubik's Cube, I guess.
Yeah.
I think the other answer, and this is a bit more functional or crass, is that it's it was an effort, not so calculated, but just to make sure that I was always going to be working. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you just if you're below the line, no one cares about your face. You know what I mean? Like, in the sense of, like, just like you're skilled and you can work on a million things, but actors don't get a million opportunities, right? Your face has got to be right for the role and the right age and the right everything, And so I was like, well, if I could do all these different jobs, then I'm always going to have an opportunity in some part of the business. If this work dries up, I can do this. And so I think it was, just like, to use a weird metaphor, like, to make sure that my stool had like 11 legs. So even if 5 of them broke, the stool wasn't going to fall over. You know what I mean? And also, like, I really like doing things that are challenging. So, I like to feel like I'm always learning. So for me, like, a big part of that was also, like, to push myself into an area where I didn't have a lot of experience, to try to grow in that area and learn a lot about that. Just to always feel like as I move through life, I'm always like expanding my knowledge base and pushing myself to grow as an artist. So yeah, it's felt relatively seamless, I guess, from the outside. Plenty of times I've been terrified that I didn't know what I was doing, but I really do like being in a learning posture. I really do like being like, oh my God, I have no idea what this is, but I'm gonna kill myself to do a good job and you know what I mean, and really learn more. Like, when I did my first film, we lost our editor pretty early, and then I was really lucky to find another editor who came on, but he couldn't finish the movie with me. But he was an amazing guy. He actually ended up being the editor on I Hope We Can Still Be Friends as well. And he also taught, he's great, John Quinn, and he also taught editing. So I knew I was going to have to finish the movie, and I didn't know how to use. I knew how to use Final Cut, but I didn't know how to use Avid. And so I just went on YouTube over a weekend and looked at every Avid like tutorial I could. And then he was there to like help me when I had questions. And so then when he had to leave my project, I finished editing my movie. And a lot of directors might be like, well, I don't know, it's beneath me, or it's not my job, or whatever. But like, nothing is beneath me. I feel like you should always be learning. You should always be growing. And you should also always understand how every other department on your project works. Directors are not, we're not dictators, we're coaches. And so you need to understand, how every other athlete on your team does their job, so that you can help them and support them and give them the tools they need to be great. And also that you can pick up the ball if you have to get your project across the finish line.
That's a really good analogy, actually. I've never kind of seen it that way with directing, as being like coaches in that kind of sense. I've never kind of see it that way, but it makes sense though, because at the end of the day, like that's kind of like your job. You're making sure every department runs kind of smoothly and making sure you make your days essentially, you know.
Yeah, and you're trying to you really want everybody to come to set knowing what the vision is and feeling supported, and you want people to feel good when they come to work and feel like what you've set out for them is accomplishable. And you could be screaming all the time, but that's not going to get you anywhere. You really want people to be stoked and be excited about the outcome. You know what I mean? That's when you're going to get the best work out of people.
Yeah, I 100% agree, because like I'm sure you've seen it, but I've also like seen it on sets time and time again, where the minute one of like, whether it's like an AD or producer, director, whoever, like a HOD is in a failed mood, it just brings everyone down.
Destroys the culture on set. And I think screaming is just an admission of failure. Like if you're yelling, it's because you can't communicate like an adult. I just think it's like I mean, now I sound like I'm like, oh, but I just think it's weakness. I think it's like use your indoor voice, right? Like be a grown up. You know what I mean? When I was when I was a young actor, I remember I had this AD on a show I was on. He just couldn't speak in a normal voice. Like he was just screaming all the time. I was like, are you going to be okay? Do we need to call an ambulance? Like your face is going to explode, bro. Like calm down. Like not everything your face at 100 miles an hour, but he couldn't communicate. He couldn't communicate in any other way, and it made it a horrible place to go to work.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, not to kind of harp on it too much, but like I completely agree. I always try, like whether I'm on like as a trainee or as a boom op or as a recordist on different sets, I always try to be as nice and as acquainted as possible, because that's like you're with the same people for like 12 to 14 hours sometimes.
Jeez, it's so long. Yeah.
Like the least you can do is be cordial, even when shit hits the fan.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean? It's going to be hard anyway. The work is going to be impossible anyway, right? Like no matter what you do, it's still going to be a super long day and super frustrating, and everyone's going to be super tired. So why make it worse?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, moving swiftly on, because I'll be able to talk about it for hours, and I don't have you for hours. So, what I was gonna say was, you've worked in loads of different countries, but you've directed now in America and Ireland specifically. What are kind of like your key differences that you've seen or witnessed as a director for both American TV and Irish film and short films?
Ooh. I think the crews in Ireland are great. Like I've had really good experiences there. So I've done 2 things there now. Well, I mean, there's some fundamental differences that just have more to do with like work practices than attitude or, anything like that, or culture, which is just like, we work longer hours in the States than you do. I mean, America's just like, they don't care about anybody's feelings. They just want you to work until you drop. So we tend to work like longer hours in the States than you do in Ireland, but that's neither here nor there. You know what I mean? I feel like if you're focused and you're disciplined, you can get the work done in a shorter work day. And I think, LA is getting better about not running people into the ground. Like when I first started, and I did a series in Canada, and they were just like so undisciplined. And we'd start at 6 a.m. on Monday, and we would do so much overtime during the week that we would be starting at like 6 p.m. on Friday. Like that's how like bad we had pushed into the weekend. And we would do the dreaded Fraturday. I don't know if people listening know that term, but that's when your Friday pushes into your Saturday, and you'd get home at like 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. Your week would be just torched. So I think that I think we're better at that now in the States, of just having a more civilized workflow. And I think that's really important, because they are long hours and they're difficult hours. And I think you want to respect people's rest and their families and people's need to, get home. So I think there's that. I feel like, in a lot of other ways, because, I run my sets a certain way, I don't see as much of a difference. I mean, maybe if I was coming on to somebody else's set, I might notice differences. We have different words for things and the call sheets look different. But I mean, Ireland enough now that like, I feel like I know the lingo. But it was really fun. It was really fun to build the to build our call sheets with Rick and Nisha on our shoot because they just looked different than home. And so I was like, ooh, it was fun to see how they were different. You know what I mean? But like not in a negative way. I think also, some of American production practices are probably starting to bleed into the Irish workflow because so many projects are coming and shooting in Ireland now. You know what I mean? So I think you're probably going to see more similarities. Between the two countries. The incentive program has really brought a lot of work over to Ireland. And I know some really big shows are shooting there now, like some big Apple shows are shooting there now. And obviously when I came, which was 10 years ago, Penny Dreadful, which was an American, and Vikings, which were both, I guess Vikings was probably an English show. But more Western, more kind of American shows are coming. Yeah. So, but I find it I had a great time. Like there wasn't anything I would have changed. It was, you were there. It was a really fast shoot. We shot the movie in 11 days. I told everybody, I said, this is going to be really hard, but it's also going to be really fast. And then it's going to be over. That it went as promised. And I really wanted to respect everybody's time and get people home on time. I think we only did a few minutes of overtime on the shoot. And everybody really worked together to make things go quickly. And it was a really pleasant experience. I think the main thing I can say is I had a great time. It was tough. Like we had one scene that we shot, and like I got in the car that night and I was like, God, that scene didn't work at all. And it won't go in the movie. It doesn't work. And, because everybody was just so organized and focused and like present. I came back and we did a whole reshoot. We shot that whole scene again and it played so much better. And it just, it was great. Everybody just really, I just had pros, you know what I mean? Everybody and everybody really like worked together. And God, it was a really joyful, it was as joyful a time as, working long hours and not taking lunch breaks could be on a movie set.
Yeah. I was going to say, so the film got selected for Galway Film Festival. Congratulations, by the way.
Yay! Congratulations to you too. Yeah. Sure, I worked for the club anyway. But, exactly. But I was just going to say, with the film festival route and kind of distribution, like, what's the plan in terms of selling the film? Are you going to be keeping it to Ireland, like nationally, or are you going to try bring it like internationally into like Europe or maybe back to America or that kind of sense? Yeah, I'm just trying to figure that out right now. It's what's interesting is, I was an Irish crew and it's an Irish cast. But I think the themes are very universal. So I hope it'll find an audience in America. It is very small, very artsy. It's a very artsy film. I went up to our script supervisor on the movie, Magda, and I was like, and like at one point I was like, man, this is a really weird movie. And she goes, yeah, but we need more weird movies. And I was like, you're right, we do need more weird movies. So, it's a very art house. It's a very art house film. We're going to do this festival. And I feel like it is a good festival movie. So we'll do some more festivals. And then I'm hoping it just ends up, honestly, I don't really know. It would be great if it got, I don't think it's going to, I think so few movies make it into the theaters nowadays. That's not really the outcome that we're chasing. But I think it would be great if it ended up like on a really good like genre platform like Shudder or, or Hulu, like one of the platforms that like does a lot of like, genre programming. So that's kind of my goal for it. And definitely getting it like, platformed in Ireland, I think is really important. And maybe in Europe more generally. But I think it'd be great to get it on a streamer by Halloween. Horror movies play year round, so it doesn't really need to be tied to Halloween because I think it's as much a psychological thriller as it is a horror film. So it could probably be programmed at any time of the year and it would work. But it's funny, it was like we made this little movie and we were excited to get it into the FLA and it did, and we're kind of like riding that wave, and then we'll have festivals, and then I think in the fall we'll figure out where we want it to go next.
Amazing, perfect, that's great. I suppose I'm just going to finish on this one last question. We tend to say this question to everyone that comes onto the show. How do you deal with rejection?
Ooh. Well, I have been doing this a very long time, Mark, and for every success that you see someone has had 1,000 touch points of rejection. It is
Yeah.
it is the nature of the beast. Oh,
Yeah.
my car just made a noise. It is the absolute nature of the beast. I really feel like some of my resilience came from my childhood, because I was raised by a single dad, and he was very much the guy that, like, when you fell and, you know, skinned your knee, or, you know, you had like something bad happen at school, he would just be like, you got to just suck it up, buddy. You know what I mean? He was not he was very loving, but he was not a huggy kind of guy. He was like, I broke my arm once in summer camp, and he was like, you better ride your bike home. So I had to ride my bike home with my broken arm. I very much feel like, you know, you have to do two things. The first thing is just to remind yourself that the rejection is just an aspect of the work. It's unavoidable. You will feel it for your whole career, and then you have to push yourself through that, and continue to focus on your ability and your desires and your drive as an artist, and continue to try to improve yourself at all times. When I was on Friends, I was up for a really big movie, and I had this, I was being told by everybody involved that I was going to get the role, and then I didn't get it. And I was really, really bummed. It would have been a big one. But I was lucky. I was on a show at the time, and I went back to set at Friends. I was working that day, and Jennifer Aniston was like, oh, you seem super bummed. And I was like, I was up for this movie and I didn't get it. And she goes, that is never going to go away. That is going to be a part of your career for your entire career. She's like, it happens to me all the time. It happens to everybody here all the time. You know, my friend, I remember my friend Sam Rockwell being up for the movie Man on the Moon, and Jim Carrey getting it. And, you know what I mean? You're like, oh, your buddy's already a movie star, but this other, like, it just never goes away. It's always going to be there. So the idea is just to be really fierce and devoted to growing yourself as an artist, working on your skill set, finding things that make you happy, finding things that have nothing to do with the entertainment business that also make you happy, because you can't tell stories about human beings if you're not being a human being yourself. And just be devoted to your own journey, because your journey isn't going to look like anybody else's journey. You know, like, do not get mired in the compare and despair thing that we all do, or like, oh, this person got the thing that I wanted, or that person's the same age as me, but they're way ahead of me. Like, your journey is your own journey, and find the things that make you happy, the friends that make you happy, the art that makes you happy, lean into that. And then think about yourself as an athlete, right? Like, you don't know when your big fight's coming, but you got to stay ready. So always be training, always be making yourself better as an artist, because you may never get where you want to go. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter for all of us. You know what I mean? I wish I was, you know, the next fucking Spider-Man. Not going to happen. But if I can always be growing and bettering myself as an artist, then that's its own reward. You know what I mean? And then none of us know what's going to happen next. So all we can do is focus on ourselves and our ability, and then find a good community, find other like-minded artists that, you know, your friends that love the things that you love and want to go talk for hours and hours about movies, and, you know, because we do this because we love it. You know what I mean? So you want to continue to remind yourself of why you chose it and why you love it, because that'll keep you from getting too bummed out.
Yeah. Perfect. Great. Great answer. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for being on the episode, and hope everything goes well.
It's great to see you. Yeah.
I mean,
thank you for working on the movie, and it was such a great time having you there. And I'm glad you're thriving down there in the Big Dub, and hopefully we'll get to see you again on that island or this one.
Definitely,
but thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.